You've tuned in to chipsgrooveradio with Mike and Jesse.
Recently, anything fun?
Honestly, I've been playing a shitload of this, like just a game I did not expect to love as much as I do, but it's called Slay the Spire. It's been around for a couple of years.
Yeah,
it's like around. A roguelike. Yeah, it's like a roguelike card game. But obviously I got it on PS5. And I just bought it on a lark because I'd heard of it and it was on sale. One of my friends said it was good and I picked it up and I am fucking totally hooked. This game is awesome. My son loves it. He's been doing great. And my wife loves it so much that she actually picked up a copy of it on Switch.
Oh, nice.
For their from her and my daughter's trip to New York City this weekend. And she says she was playing it on the train and stuff.
That's awesome.
It's to the point where, like, there have been some nights where, you know, the kids have gotten to bed, she's been going to get changed or taking a shower, and I'll be playing when she comes out, and she'll be like, oh, I was hoping to play. And I'll just be like, it's all good. It's all you. I'll stop. You play. I'll hang out and try not to tell you what to do too much. Because, yeah, that's rude, Jesse.
Well, it sounds like it's just in time for Slay the Spire 2, which is coming out next year, apparently.
Yeah. I didn't know that, but that's fantastic. There's actually a regular board game version of it that just went up for pre-sale as well. I don't know.
It's getting a lot of traction. It's one of those games that seems to be transcending its initial phase. Yeah. So now it's becoming a board game.
Probably not one. Yeah, it's weird. It's like a video game that was designed to play like a card game, but isn't actually a card game. And now they're finally making a card and board game version of the video game. It's very weird.
It's like
probably not a game we'll be covering on this podcast, though, because there's all of like 3 music tracks. So,
oh, really?
They just literally, like, there's boss music and there's end boss music, and then there's the same song that literally plays on loop the whole time that you're ascending the spire. So
that's oddly appropriate given the soundtrack we're doing today.
Yeah, true story.
I mean, okay. I mean, that was a segue I didn't plan, but now is the time.
Now is the time. So I'm going to introduce this one if this is okay with you.
Absolutely. Mike. You go ahead, sir.
All
this is your game.
So okay. I'm going to preface this by saying
you got to
everything we say about this soundtrack, we say from a place of love and respect.
Yes, absolutely.
I have never designed a video game soundtrack. Mike has never designed a video game soundtrack. They can't all be winners. And we've been reviewing a lot of 10 out of 10s lately. This is a game that I played in the very early stages of my video game history. It's an NES title called Clash at Demonhead. It's one of those games that
sounds fantastic.
It sounds fantastic. It's a great sounding title for a game. It's one of those games that I had a copy of on my NES, and I never beat because, come to find out, a lot of NES games are really tough. Who knew? And so it's one that, like, you know, you kind of, like, I always kind of managed to get to about the same part in the game. And I went back and played through it a bunch of times, but just never really got past that point. So I didn't actually experience, like, the last boss, the ending, any of that stuff. So for some reason, I had in my brain that this game had an awesome soundtrack. Spoilers, it does not. At one point, I watched the movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is fantastic. Also a great comic book series. Comic book was the original, of course. If you haven't checked it out, I'd highly recommend it. The movie is phenomenal and does great homage to the comic, and it also has great music. I was suddenly, one of my memories was shaken loose from my tree, my memory tree, when I watched that movie for the first time, and I realized that Scott Pilgrim's band is named Clash at Demonhead.
Clash at Demonhead.
And then at the time that it came out, like, there was no web resources to find OSTs. People weren't uploading stuff to YouTube like that. Like, you just couldn't find it. So I went on this like crusade to try and find the OST to this game because, again, I was convinced that it was awesome.
It's got to be good. It's got to
be good. Scott Pilgrim has a band named after it. This game has a special place in my memory banks. Well, I did finally find it, and I realized it could be better. And then after our last recording about Mega Man 2, we finished the recording, and I jokingly said to Mike, I was like, dude, have you ever heard this soundtrack? Because it's a real doozy. And I think you probably played all of about 15 seconds of a couple of different songs, and then we just sort of decided that we were going to cover it. So here we are.
And I'm excited to cover it, honestly. I mean, obviously, as you said, we're not here to poke fun at anyone or shit on anyone. That is not the goal of this.
No.
But there has to be a scale. And I think, earlier on in the show, I covered at least one that was less revered in my mind, kind of along the same lines as you, where it's, I keep hearing about the soundtrack and I remember it being good specifically for a certain song. And then you go back to it and it's not quite what you thought it was and not quite what you remembered. So I was very excited to do this one because it brings us back to where games came from. And this is kind of teetering on that line where it's, okay, what is a video game soundtrack? So, this review is, again, 100% love, 100% objectivity. At least I try to be. But yeah, I think you picked a good one here because there are parts to like, honestly. Yeah. I'm not saying this is not a shit fest. We're not trying to poop on anyone. So I think this one's going to be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm sure you probably did a little bit of research to figure out who the composer was and some history. So let her rip.
Well, I did a little bit. The composer is Michiharu Hasuya. And let me see here. He has quite a few titles to his name. Let me just pull it up here. But it looks like he is done pretty much in the mid 90s. Did you find the same thing?
Yep, I saw that he officially retired from video game composition and design in 1994.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to say his most notable titles, at least just looking at the list, are probably the Ys games. Ys 1, 2, and 3. The Vanished Omens, Ancient Ys Vanished, The Final Chapter, Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys. So, I mean, that's a commendable series, a very popular series. So he does have his hands, or at least he did, in some titles that I've actually heard of. So that's cool. I did go on to listen to part of, I believe it was Rygar.
Yeah, that's another game that I played the crap out of in my NES days. Oh man.
Yeah, that's him too.
Yeah. And honestly, Ys 3 Wanderers, that was one of the first like RPGs that I owned.
Oh, really?
Great. Oh, yeah. It's a great game. I don't remember it having a really standout soundtrack, but I probably just wasn't really keyed into it at that time. And it's one of those games that I just haven't really replayed. I think I actually played the SNES version of the game, not the NES version, because the SNES version was essentially like a port of
like a little bit better
original.
updated.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like the Super Mario Brothers collection on Super Nintendo, just updated graphics or something.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there were some other games on his, what do you call it? I don't know what you'd call it. Bibliography?
Roster, let's call it a roster.
Yeah, we'll call it a roster. There were a few others that really stood out. Rygar, like you already mentioned, has a very similar soundtrack. It's kind of in the same vein. But I remember Golgo 13 as having a pretty distinctively good OST. I was always fairly impressed with it. And apparently he did a Godzilla game that I didn't know about for SNES. So I don't know how that one missed me, because I was always a huge Godzilla fan. But
I missed that one too. Yeah. Super Godzilla for SNES on 1993.
Yeah.
And then I think officially, at least on Moby Games right now, His last title that I see is Sansara Naga 2 in 1994. So that's, it's a short career, but it's not bad. I mean, he's got some titles under his belt, and obviously people kept coming back to him. So this section of the show is kind of celebrating who these people are and what they went on to do and where they come from. So he's got plenty of titles to his name, so that's very cool. And Clash at Demonhead is just one of those. So what do you say we get into a very brief rundown of the story of this game? Does that sound good to you?
Sure.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the game itself sounds very grand and actually has a significant story behind it, which would lend itself, I think, to an experience perhaps more thorough than other games of the era. It features protagonist Billy Big Bang Blitz. And I got to tell you, I was at work when I was researching this, and I laughed out loud. It was on my lunch. I was like, okay, this is fantastic already. But in a nutshell, he's called away from his vacation to save Professor Plum, apparently of Clue fame. He is the creator of the Doomsday Bomb, Professor Plum, which, as the name suggests, could destroy the world. And poor Mr. Plum, he's been kidnapped by an evil skeleton mastermind named Tom Guycott. I'll say that again. A skeleton mastermind named Tom Guycott.
Incidentally, when you meet Tom Guycott in the game, he's not just a skeleton boss. He's not just a skeleton demon. He also flies around, and he's introduced literally as Tom Guycott, not Guycott, just Tom. That's the thing.
Tom Guycott.
Anyway, Tom Guycott.
That sums up the game. That sets up the game. And I'm not going to harp on the intricate details of this gem of a story, but in one paragraph, without even getting into it, it sounds fantastic.
Very well developed.
I am on board for this game.
Yep.
Oh, yes. One more thing. And Billy Blitz works for Saber, which means Special Assault Brigade for real emergencies. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I'm just having too much fun with this.
Oh, boy.
It's so... I love it. This is the mindset of the world when we were for the very early times of video games. So I'm all about this story and just the goofiness of it. The game itself is an open-ended platformer. Some I read equate it to an early Metroidvania. It is. From the plays I watched, it looks surprisingly big.
It is, yeah.
You wander around the screen left and right, just like your standard platformer. You use projectiles like different guns, and you traverse each level. You save people, defeat bosses, you navigate pits and moving platforms like any good platformer of the time. And I will say, upon looking at the game, watching those playthroughs, it does appear to be rather fluid.
Yeah.
I was impressed by the scrolling, the responsiveness of it, and the action. It's not terribly complex, but it didn't look thrown together. I don't know, having played the game, can you speak to that in terms of how, because it's like you go left to right real easily. It didn't look like any lagging, no overbearing on the system itself, which a lot of games of the era had. It would slow down the gameplay if too much was going on, but it looked really fluid. Yeah,
it was. Some of the, like when you actually fight Tom Guycott, the skeleton mastermind, that's the only thing that I remember being a little bit skippy is when he like flies across the screen, but it's just because he's going ridiculously fast and they just didn't have enough frames to actually make it look stable. Overall, I mean, the game actually plays pretty well, if I'm being honest. Like there's an exploratory phase where you're actually climbing up Demonhead Mountain and you get to choose different routes that you're going to take. So there's actually there's like a tree of different, levels and boss encounters and stuff that you can go through. So, I mean, that's kind of unique for this point in video gaming. I mean, usually it's like you play level 1, then level 2, then level 3. Aside from warp pipes in the Super Mario series, there's really not many other opportunities for you to try different courses and different level combinations to figure out, what the easiest way for you to make it through is going to be.
When I saw that map, I was fairly impressed. That looked crazy. Like it looked like a mess of lines and dots of locations. I don't know how big that game is or how many of those locations are significant, But I was impressed when I saw the map. I'm like, damn, this is a fairly intense game. There's a lot to do.
Yeah.
Here. So I think the idea of choice and the open-endedness of it is really cool.
Yeah, and it's funny because the levels all have names, but the names are just the route that you're taking. And if you look at the map, they're all numbered like 1, 10, 12, 16, 22. So the levels are literally like Route 5, Route 15, Route 17. It's just the road number that you're taking between 2 points on the map. Yeah.
Well,
pretty funny.
I do think the positives so far, Jesse, are really the scope of the game and the gameplay, which are two very important things. As for the sprite work, very crisp and detailed for NES titles. Even the smaller enemies, I can really tell what's going on. I think they did spend a lot of time giving each character literally character. Yeah. The game stops off for plenty of dialogue, which gives the programmers really a unique opportunity that games of the era really just didn't pursue a lot, which is profile pictures, reactions to two characters talking. There's a Japanese anime aesthetic, and there are plenty of emotions and expressions utilized in the game itself, which I really think helps the package as a whole. Yeah,
it really has a very, almost like a manga feel to it, because there's a lot of scenes of dialogue in between levels. The intro looks like something you'd see in a comic book. Very expressive features, like you said. Like the art direction was really quite good. And it's... I think that's one of the things that always kind of stood out to me, because you really didn't see, especially in NES titles, expressive faces and features. Like that just wasn't really a thing. I mean, even in games like, Final Fantasy or a lot of the other kind of long form story driven ones, there weren't cutscenes, there weren't highly detailed sprites. Like it was, things could look kind of mushy. That wasn't really the case in this one.
I mean, we're talking, this is a game in 1989, and they're doing profile pictures, they're doing reactions, they're doing what looks like a Dragon Ball cartoon, if you will. Like, I'm just putting a label on it. I don't really have anything else to compare it to right now. But if you think about the reactions you're getting in this game, and then you fast forward to 1994 when Final Fantasy VI comes out, and they're not doing profile pictures. No. They're not this highly emotional and story-driven game with so much backstory. They keep their emotions in the sprites, right? So your characters on screen emote as much as they possibly can in like 24 pixels. Whereas this game's, it's giving you a dialogue box and some actually hand-drawn expressions and different peoples and different faces. So I think it's a really big ask for the NES to take that seriously, and I think that's really cool.
It's kind of funny too, because there's a few other things in this game that really they're like callbacks to especially like Japanese culture at the time that the game was developed. Like you go through this game, this very anime looking game. You're jumping around the place, you're using guns and jetpacks and all sorts of futuristic stuff. But then there's a weird callback to what do you call it? There's a weird callback to like Greek mythology, and the only weapon you can use to defeat the last boss in the game is the Sword of Apollo. Like that's very out of place. But
it is a little
very
out of place.
I mean, very typical for the time. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
But Jesse, in all of this grandness that is Clash at Demonhead, whatever. Demonhead,
not Demon Hand. Demonhead.
I got that wrong earlier this week.
Okay. It's funny because you said it again when we were prepping this morning to record tonight.
Did I?
And I was thinking to myself, am I going to have to correct him and be like, don't call it Demonhead. Demonhead. But that's okay. We just got there anyway.
Well, so despite the game's aesthetics and gameplay, we are here to discuss the soundtrack. And there is kind of a handshake that has to happen with games of this time. Programmers need to decide how much gameplay there needs to be versus how much sound design there can be. And I have a feeling that the amount of space required for this game really significantly affected the music that we're going to hear.
Yeah.
Again, it is composed by Michiharu Hasuya, contributed to many projects. The problem with this soundtrack, for me, is the lack of diversity.
Yeah.
And looking at the track listing itself, like most NES games, this isn't just relegated to this one, it's pretty bare. A track for everything that's kind of important, but if you look at the individual tracks, there is Route Theme 1 and Route Theme 2.
Right.
And that really...
Those are the only two songs
a warning for me.
For the most part that you hear. Like,
yeah.
And there's like 30 or 40 routes. So there's some other stuff like an underwater song and like a song that plays when you're in like a cave. But I mean, really, you're talking like 2 different songs for the majority of the game. And then 2 others that get thrown in from time to time.
Yeah. So for the size of the game, you are subjected to essentially 2 tracks for as long as you decide to play the game. And unfortunately, the size of the game and the lack of innovation, whether purposeful or by limitation of space, is something that will make you want to just like, after a certain point, sit in a dark room and cut eyes out of pictures because the song loops so many times.
Yeah.
And again, all I had to do was watch a replay of someone playing through the game, and I could skip ahead if I wanted to, but you have to put yourself in the position of playing the game. Jesse, you said you've attempted this game several times. I don't know how long of a game would you say it was, even though you've never beat it.
It could be pretty long, especially for a Metroidvania type side scroller. I mean, I don't think I could guess at this point how long it would take to actually play it through from start to finish, but it ain't quick.
Yeah. So let's take Route Theme 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bright theme. It has a good start. There's a slower build, and then it crescendos into the main thrust of the song. I will say that the lead at its height is probably, it's not DuckTales screech worthy, but it can get a little grating. It hits a register that starts to really affect my ears. The loop of the song is maybe 50 seconds, and in that 50 seconds we have a build-up, a main melody, a couple short changes, and then that keyboard sweep back into the loop. So there is a real sense of adventure here, and I do appreciate that because this game needs it. It's fast paced. You're flying around the screen, navigating platforms, shooting enemies. There has to be some excitement to it. The game itself feels like a lighthearted romp, so this song does a decent job of capturing that. Yeah, it's not overly serious in tone, so the songs don't need to be. Yeah, but the focus on the lead instrument here is a very poor decision. You know, there are so many other tonally acceptable instruments, even for the NES, that could have been used. To be fair, it's not awful. It just hits a register that really borders on annoying for me. So imagining playing through these levels and having to listen to it that much, I don't know. It would be very hard to sit through.
Yeah, it's funny. You look at a game titled something like Clash at Demonhead. It sounds like super serious business. Like it's going to be like a rockin' soundtrack and like dark and gritty. Mm-hmm. But no, this game it's very comedic. If you watch any bit of a playthrough, you'll even see that, like, you know, when Billy gets hit by an enemy during the course of a level, he makes this big, exaggerated, goofy, like comic face. When he dies, he turns into like an angel with a halo and wings that floats up to the top of the screen and off. It's a very goofy, very silly kind of game. It's funny because when you mentioned Dragon Ball as being, you know, kind of seemingly along the same lines, you're very much right. Actually, the original NES Dragon Ball game has some very similar musical themes in it, some very similar sound effect usage, that kind of thing. And I think that Route 1, incidentally, is the song that is burned into my brain the most, because it's one of the songs that plays in the first couple of levels. And I mean, all things considered, I think it's actually a pretty decent song. It's got good tempo. It's got good pacing. I think that if the main instrument were just brought down like an octave, like just one octave, the whole thing. And then it has like this low, very quick, almost percussive beat that's underlying the whole song, but it's so fast and so low that it kind of just sounds like noise. I think that if the whole song were brought down a little bit and that percussion were broken up a little bit more, so it just didn't sound constant and maybe brought up a little bit, I think we'd have something on our hands here.
Absolutely. And I do think that the lead instrument there it's just a little too high to be so present and so in your face during the song. It's one of those things where, like you said, you just bring it down a register and it changes the song. And I think they could have afforded at least a little bit of percussion here as well. Maybe even break it up to be a little bit more stop-start with the percussion and let the melody really come into its own a little bit. But as it stands, it's more of just like a really bass-heavy, low growl underneath the entire song. It becomes like they simply want you to listen to that high-pitched song or that high-pitched instrument, and it's really just kind of off-putting for me.
I think that's one thing that kind of just is consistent across the entire soundtrack. And you find this in a lot of NES games, even Atari games. You know, the soundtrack in this game doesn't really sound so much like instruments in the same way that like Mega Man 2 did, where you could there were very distinctive instruments in all of the tracks in that OST. In this one, it's kind of more like just electronic and synthy sounding, and it sounds like an arcade game or like a late Atari game that had a little bit more music to it. It's almost like the music in Clash at Demonhead was just like a couple of years behind the game's actual development, and it really shows across the whole soundtrack. It's almost like a lot of other really, really memorable soundtracks of this day and age had like 3 layers to every given song. This soundtrack has like 1 and maybe 1.5 layers to every given song. Like they're very simple, you know?
Very get the job done. Very, okay, we need something to listen to while we play the game. I agree with that completely. There's just not enough dynamic here.
I think the bones are there, though. I think with a little bit more development and maybe a little bit more memory space on the cartridge, because I think you're absolutely right. That there probably had to be some sacrifices made because of how complex the actual game was. We could have the makings of a pretty baller OST.
Yeah. And with this first track, he captures the zaniness of the game very well. It's the beginning of a good track. It just never quite gets there for me. So, what about you? What is one song that you had?
I would say, aside from Route 1, which is the one that definitely always, like I said, kind of stood out in my brain, I always really liked the Shop songs. Super Shop is one that I always just kind of liked. It's kind of, bright, poppy, jammy. It's the register's not too high, so it's not really grating. It's got a nice little kind of bit of a ditty of a beat underneath. Just bright, cheerful. It does, it loops pretty fast, but I always kind of liked it.
It does have character.
It does. And, Susie's Super Shop, Susie's Exchange Shop, rather, the one that plays right after it, I don't really like very much. So I can kind of mush them up together, but, Super Shop has a nice beat to it. It's not as grating on the ears. And then you look at Susie's Exchange Shop and you're like, oh, well, that's got to be just as good, right? No, it gets right back to the high-pitched, high-register, twangy kind of licks on the guitar, and not as good. But yeah, Super Shop.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because as soon as you go from Super Shop to Susie's Exchange Shop, and the loop is cut down by at least 10 seconds on Susie's Exchange Shop. Was not long at all on Super Shop, but still was much more palatable to the ear than Susie's Exchange Shop. I think Super Shop has a real good move to it. Real good groove.
Yeah.
It's maybe 15-second loop.
Yeah.
But it does exactly what you and I were talking about. It brings down that main instrument, very mid-range tone, nice beat to it, and it's enjoyable to listen to. It reminds me of, hey, this is a nice little break from the rest of the game. It's kind of like Mario visiting Toad's shop in Mario 3. You know, you go in there, you play a little game, you buy an item or something, and then you get back out. So this one doesn't need to be long. And it's only 15 seconds, which is, I don't know, a fifth of the length of Route 1. And I love it a lot more. And I think that's interesting because all he did was really, he middled out the instruments. They're not too high, not too low. And he gave the backbone a little bit of character.
Yeah. And I think that middling out the instruments is what really makes this song, honestly, pretty enjoyable. And, you know, we talk about the loop and you go on to Susie's Exchange Shop and that is a 5-second loop. I just timed it.
Exactly.
And you can tell. You can tell. Yeah.
Okay, I got to get something on paper for this. All right. But that, and we're not going to harp on this soundtrack, ladies and gentlemen. This might be a shorter episode. The one thing I wanted to call attention to, we all love a good boss battle theme, Jesse. Who can forget fighting Zeramas? Who can forget fighting Zeramas in Final Fantasy IV? And who remembers the tension of Mega Man 2's boss theme as you watch your enemy appear and their health bar increases before a fight? Great boss themes have a sense of danger, maybe even some uncertainty or frantic nature to them to make you screw up while you fight. Well, Jesse, on the shoulders of those giants sits this theme. It's, I don't know, a 4-second loop. And although the darkness and melody comes through as an Imperial March of sorts, it never actually does anything. It just repeats and repeats for as long or short as the fight demands. And it is hilarious.
Yep.
It wants to do something, but it just never does anything.
It's almost like watching one of those animated GIFs on like the, wait for it Reddit page or like a video where you're expecting something to happen and then it just stuff keeps going on the screen. And it just never goes anywhere. You get suckered into watching it for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and nothing actually came of it. This is the same way. Like if the boss battle music started out with like maybe 2 loops of the original 4 or 5 seconds or whatever it was, and then actually built to something else, that'd be pretty cool. Like, it's a great start. You start listening to it and you're like, oh, wow, this is going to be awesome. And then it just keeps going and going.
Just keeps
and going. And it never goes anywhere. Yeah. And then it's done.
It's so unfortunate. It's unfortunate because he obviously knows what he's doing. We just talked about Super Shop. Fun song. It may be short, but at least it's fun. It's something to listen to. And we make our jokes and we can be harsh, but the lack of passion here is just unfortunate to me. For such a bright game, such a game with all the seeds of great things, comes this uninspired pile. And I've covered a similar track with John back in the day. We did on Ray Zanber. It's a shoot 'em up game, a spaceship. The boss theme was very similar to this, and it's disappointing because in instances like this where a boss fight could give you, the listener, not only a reprieve from the one song they've heard all game for hours on end, only to deliver a 4-second loop with zero inspiration, zero tension, zero interest, really. I think the biggest flaw of the game is the soundtrack's repetitiveness. Yeah. And when the chance arose to change it up with a boss fight, he found a way to make it unbearable in short durations. And
the really sad thing is that the final boss theme, which we can kind of talk about a little bit, but it's basically everything that we're saying about the boss battle theme. It's the same thing. It is a loop, but this one is even noisier and just sounds like annoying, and it just loops and loops and loops and loops and loops and loops. Yeah. Rough.
Well, so, I mean, like we said, we're not going to harp on it, but did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to get through, or even another track that you were thinking of talking about?
Yeah. There's a few other tracks that stand out. We don't need to go through all of them. If anybody wants to listen to the soundtrack, you can find it on YouTube or wherever else you want to look.
Thankfully, it's less than 17 minutes.
Yes. I won't put Mike's ears through the pain of listening to Final Area, because that might be the worst song on the soundtrack. And if grading had a sound, then that would be it. I would say for other songs that I did kind of like the jam of, Hermit's Five Forces is a pretty fun little song. Again, a very repetitive loop. But it's the instruments are a little bit more middled out, and it's not so bad. It suffers from the same issues that a lot of other songs on the album do, which is just the loop is too short, there's not enough complexity, and then here we are.
And that is just ultimately the nail in the coffin for this album, is the fact that it's just repetitive. You can't really escape how frequently a song loops on this album, whereas there are games where on the NES, same era, where the loops may be shorter, but there's stuff going on. There's stuff that's interesting to listen to. This just reminds me that I'm playing a game over and over, and it's probably annoying the piss out of me at certain points. Like after a certain amount of time listening to Route 1 or Route 2, it's like I need something different. And the unfortunate thing is, I understand that this was a different time in video games, and they maybe didn't take it as seriously as they do now. But if you're going to back your game, your product with something, definitely put some effort into it, a little bit more than maybe. I mean, great things have been done under great pressure, and just because there's lack of space or not enough time to do something, it shows where really good composers can bring in really unique and clever stuff. I've seen the NES do amazing stuff, and it doesn't have to be this grand orchestra to get the point across.
Right.
For this game, it's just like, it feels like a job. It's like, all right, we need to do something, and okay, this works, so let's just throw it on there. It's sound, people can't complain about it. Yep. But what it does is it's going to make the player turn down the music, which then hurts the product even more. So it's like, it's a bummer. I think there's a lot to like here in terms of the game as a whole. The soundtrack has seeds of greatness. It's just not given the opportunity to grow for whatever reason, whether it be space or time or whatever. And it's a shame. I think Hasuya knows what he's doing. He obviously got hired several times. I just think this was a miss for him.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of tell that the soundtrack in this game was probably kind of a secondary concern. They had a lot more going on. They were focused on other things, and there are some fun tracks. And like I said before, the bones are there. I'd love to see what it would have looked like if it, maybe the composer had more time to develop it, or there were more resources available. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a game that I played a lot of, and I have fond memories of it, even if the soundtrack stinks. And I'll just always remember those 2 or 3 songs that I do really like. Absolutely. And I can just kind of tune the rest out.
It's a good idea.
I would say, we can do our ratings first, or we can talk about our final thoughts. I think we kind of got the final thoughts out of the way already.
Yeah, I think the final thoughts have been said.
I'm going to ask you to just very quickly subject all of the listeners to arguably the worst song on the soundtrack, and then we can give our ratings.
Okay.
And that is Karate Power.
Karate Power.
Karate
this game's
power.
version of the Superstar.
Yep.
Ugh, oh boy.
It's you can listen to about 2 or 3 seconds of it, and you're probably gonna
set.
just turn it off so the people's ears don't bleed. It's rough.
What you want to do is
It's
you want to
rough.
go to a coffee shop, a nice quiet coffee shop where everyone's reading or on their computers doing work, and then you just want to turn that song on.
Yeah. You know what I should do? I should download an MP3 of it and use it as the ringtone on my phone. And scare the crap out of anybody that's standing around me, and also that would make me pick up the phone as quickly as possible, so that
I'm
I
so
wouldn't
sorry.
have to hear a ring anymore. I'm so sorry.
You're going to be in a place, and that guy from across the room is going to point at you and go, "Clash at Demonhead."
Yep, and then we'll be friends, best friends forever.
Friends forever.
Best friends forever.
So, Jesse, what would you rate this game soundtrack?
I mean.
You can let
probably,
nostalgia get in the way if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna give it a generous 3 out of 10 boomerang guns, because it's not all dog water. Like there are worse soundtracks on the NES. Rocky and Bullwinkle, I'm looking at you. That one's horrendous.
God.
It's real bad. It's real
I remember that one.
Yeah. And you know what? The tempo, the pacing, and the fun of it really does come through in a lot of the tracks, even if they can be a little bit grating and a little bit harsh. And, another thing to remember about the soundtrack in this game is there's a lot of sound effects in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a very noisy game. There's explosions, there's, bullets shooting all over the place. You're making crazy noises when you get hit by stuff. Enemies make noises when you hit them. So I think that ultimately, if you watch a playthrough, you'll find that the music isn't quite as harsh and grating as it is just listening to it after the fact. It's kind of synthesized with the sound effects, which actually the sound effects in the game are pretty good, and that could very well be a reason that the soundtrack is so. And
that is a good point. Especially on NES where they had I think 5 channels to work with, and the soundtrack often takes a backseat to what's happening on screen. So, with all the projectiles and with all the enemies and the sound effects coming through the actual action on the game, the soundtrack itself would likely take a backseat to those sounds. So it might be a little bit more palatable than I'm giving it credit for, but you actually, sir, were a little harsher than I. I gave it a 4 out of 10 Doomsday Bombs. Right. The biggest thing I can convey here, he tried, and it's just not for me. 100%. I think there are seeds. I've said it again. I've said it twice. I'm going to say it again. There are seeds of greatness here throughout the entire game, soundtrack included. There is a lot of fun stuff here that I really enjoyed, but I think it just needed some more time in the oven and maybe a little bit more space. So 4 out of 10. It's worth a listen just to get an idea of what we're talking about. But yeah, you can find the soundtrack online. You cannot buy it, at least not that I know of. But give it a listen and definitely check out some of his other tracks or other soundtracks, because he's got some good titles to his name and definitely worth a listen. Mishiharu Hasuya.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? If you're have an emulator copy of it, give the game a shot. It's actually pretty fun. And you can tell that it's a late. What's that? Yeah, it's fun. And you can tell that it's a late release NES title. I mean, 89, this is SNES comes out in 2 years. There's a lot in this game that, if you compare it to an original release like Solomon's Key or something like that, I mean, it is leagues better in almost every possible way. Mm-hmm. It's a fun game. And, maybe I'll go back and try and beat it one of these days.
And that is something to consider. How much better would the soundtrack have been if they waited for Super Nintendo? I feel like he could have done so much with that. Yeah. And but it's right there at the end of the NES soundtrack. I think everyone was very aware of what the NES could do. Mm-hmm. So they packed in the gameplay, that's for sure. They really pushed the envelope there. And unfortunately, I just think it hindered the soundtrack. So
so it's kind of funny. So as we're sitting here talking about, the game, giving our final thoughts, I just pulled up a playthrough video on YouTube, And I was expecting that, maybe the route themes weren't going to be so repetitive. And they are. Another thing that I just realized I'd completely forgotten about is when you're doing one of the levels and you go from one segment of the level to another, the music resets. It's not a continuous loop when you zone from screen to screen, which makes it so much worse. So much worse.
That was always the worst shit.
Yeah. Also, I also just remembered something else funny about this game, and it's just a translation thing. But when you're fighting a boss, or when you go to a cutscene before you fight a boss, right in the middle of the screen, it literally says talking time, as if to remind you that you're not actually fighting. It's not fighting time, Mike. It's talking time.
No. It is talking time. I noticed that too.
Talking time. Yeah.
That's funny.
Boy, oh boy. Clash at Demonhead.
Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Mike. With me, as always, is Jesse. If you would like to say goodbye, sir, please do so.
See everybody, and make sure you watch out for any doomsday bombs.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please rate and subscribe. We very much appreciate it. Also visit our brand new website, magusmediaproductions.net, to get all information on every show. See you next time.
Well, hello there, Internet people. My name is Josh, and I am one of the hosts of the Nastagram RPG podcast. We're an actual play podcast, and we're good. And why are we good? Well, let's let the other host tell you. Dan.
Hey, everyone. If you like authentic, real-world sound effects, our lasers go pew-pew.
I love it. Matt.
Skip me. Coming back to Matt.
Ryan.
Okay, so after 2 decades of trying, we finally mastered the 3.5 grapple. We didn't. Never mind.
Try again.
Scratch that.
Check it out. Look it up.
John.
If you're looking for a RPG podcast that plays a whole hell of a lot of games, you like to spice the life.
Spice it up.
Spice it up.
Matt, you ready?
Yeah, I think I'm ready. If you enjoy bad accents and overacting, you'll enjoy our podcast.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
And Jake, bring us home.
I like to just say, we didn't just throw a phone on the table and hit record. Like, Josh does a damn good job with the editing. And
Facts.
if you care about that, you will not be disappointed.
That's right. We spent a bunch of money that we don't make on the podcast.
100%.
So check us out, Nastagram RPG Podcast. You can find us on all the goddamn podcast apps, and we'll see you there.
That's nasty.